The barn was still warm from 300 bodies when she pulled me into the shadow behind the wash house. My new sister-in-law, Rebecca, gripped my wrist so hard it hurt, and her eyes weren't celebrating. They were afraid. "Anna," she whispered, glancing back toward the lantern light, where my husband stood laughing with the men. "Listen to me carefully, because I will only say this once, and I will never be able to say it again. You don't know the man you married today, but I do. He's my brother." I was 18 years old. I had been a wife for less than 6 hours, and I did what every Amish bride is taught to do with a warning she doesn't want to hear. I smiled. I patted her hand, and I told her everything would be fine. It took me 11 years to understand what Rebecca was trying to give me in that dark space behind the wash house. 11 years to understand that her fear wasn't jealousy, and it wasn't bitterness, and it wasn't a woman trying to come between a husband and wife. Before I tell you what she knew, what she had survived in that family before I ever entered it, and why she risked everything to whisper to me on the one day she was supposed to stay silent, I need you to understand something about who I was that day and why I couldn't hear her. Before I go any further, I'm Anna, and this is Hannah, the Amish girl. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, and now I share the stories we were never allowed to speak out loud. If you value hearing the truth about Amish life from someone who actually lived it, subscribe and like this video, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever been warned about someone and chosen not to listen? I read every single one. I was not 17 when I married. I was 18. And in our community, that already made some of the older women murmur that I had waited a little long. My mother had married at 17. My grandmother at 16. By the time a girl finished her schooling at the end of 8th grade, and spent a few years cooking, sewing, and helping raise her younger siblings, marriage was simply the next door you walked through. You did not question the door. You thanked God for it. I met Jacob the way most of us met our husbands, at the Sunday evening singings. He was 24, 6 years older than me, which nobody thought strange. He was tall, broad through the shoulders from years of harness work, and he had a way of going very quiet and very still when he wanted something. The other girls noticed him. When he started offering me buggy rides home, when he began appearing on our porch on Sunday evenings, I felt chosen in a way I had never felt in my life. I was the youngest of 9. I had spent 18 years being one more pair of hands, and here was a grown man, settled, with land coming to him, looking at me like I was the only person in the room. My courtship lasted barely 4 months. That was normal. You did not, as the English say, see where things go. A boy began visiting, the families took notice, and within a season everyone assumed a wedding. I never once sat alone with Jacob long enough to learn who he was when the porch light went out. I knew his family was respectable. I knew his father owned good bottom land. I knew he could quote scripture and that the bishop spoke well of him. I thought that was the same thing as knowing a man. It is not. It took me more than a decade to learn the difference, and I am still learning it. Rebecca was 3 years older than Jacob, already married herself, already a mother twice over. She lived 2 farms down. During my courtship, she was kind to me, but quiet, and I mistook her quiet for shyness. I see now that it was something else. She was watching. She was deciding. She was weighing what she owed her brother against what she owed a girl she barely knew. Our wedding was held on a Thursday in late November, after the harvest was in. I woke at 4 a.m. to begin the cooking, the way my mother had and her mother before her. By midday, the house and the barn were full, near 300 people on the hard wooden benches. The bishop preached for almost 3 hours about the godly household, about the wife who yields and the husband who leads, about Sarah who called Abraham Lord. I sat with my hands folded, and I thought, I can do this. I can keep a clean house and bear good children and yield. I did not know yet that yielding to the wrong man is not a virtue. It is a slow erasure, and you do not feel it happening until there is very little of you left. The meal afterward was the kind we only made for weddings: roast chicken and bread filling, mashed potatoes with butter, gravy thick enough to stand a spoon in, and pies lined up on the long table like soldiers. People lingered for hours. The lamps were lit. The men gathered in clusters, and the women cleared and washed, and the children ran wild in the cold November dark between the house and the barn. And somewhere in the middle of all that warmth and laughter, Rebecca found me. She did not lead me anywhere obvious. She waited until I stepped out toward the wash house alone, and then she was simply there, her hand closing around my wrist, pulling me into the shadow where the lantern light didn't reach. I remember the smell of wood smoke and cold earth. I remember her face, which I had only ever seen calm, twisted now into something urgent. "You don't know the man you married today," she said. "But I do. He's my brother. I grew up in the same house as Jacob. I saw what our father was, and I have watched my brother become him, a little more every year." She glanced back over her shoulder. "When Jacob is calm, there is no kinder man in this county. But when he is crossed, when something does not go the way he has decided it will go, you will not recognize him. And the worst of it, Anna, the part nobody will tell you, is that he will make you believe it is your fault. Every time, until you cannot tell any more where he ends and your own mind begins. I want you to understand I had been raised to honor my husband above all earthly things. I had been raised to believe that a wife who listened to gossip against her own husband on her wedding day in the shadows was committing something close to sin. So I heard Rebecca's words, and instead of letting them in, I built a wall against them. I told myself she was a bitter woman. I told myself there was old trouble between siblings that I knew nothing about. I smiled. I patted her hand, and I said, "Jacob is good to me. Everything will be fine." Rebecca looked at me for a long moment, and then her face went still and closed, the way it had been all through the courtship, and I understand now that she was grieving. She had taken the one chance she would ever get, and she had watched it fall to the ground between us. "I hope you're right," she said. "I prayed I was wrong about him. I hope to God you never find out I wasn't." Then she walked back into the light and became once more the quiet sister-in-law who never said anything out of place. Stay with me, because what happened over the next 11 years, and the morning I finally understood every word Rebecca said behind that wash house, is the reason I am sitting here telling you this at all. The first year was good. I will not lie about that, because the lie is part of how it works. Jacob was gentle. He praised my cooking. He held me at night and talked about the house we would build and the children God might send. And I thought, see, Rebecca was wrong. She was bitter. She let old wounds poison her against her own brother. I was so proud of myself for not listening. I thought my obedience and my loyalty were keeping my marriage strong. The change did not arrive like a storm. It arrived like weather turning at the end of a season, so slowly you cannot name the day it happened. It began with small things, a supper that wasn't ready when he came in from the field, and the long, cold silence that followed, a silence that could last 2 days until I was apologizing for things I could not even name. A dress I had sewn that he decided was too fine, too proud, and the way he made me feel that wanting to look nice for church was a sin against the whole community. When I bought sugar at the store without asking him first, he did not raise his hand. He never once raised his hand. That is what made it so hard to explain, even to myself. He simply made the air in our house go thin, and he made me feel that I had done it, that my own carelessness had stolen the peace from our home. This is the part I most need you to understand, because I did not understand it for 11 years. He never hit me. There was no bruise to point to, no broken bone, nothing a neighbor could see over the fence. There was only a slow, patient teaching that my judgment could not be trusted, that my memory was wrong, that my feelings were pride, and my hurt was rebellion. When I cried, it was proof I was being dramatic. When I went quiet, it was proof I was being cold and withholding. There was no door I could walk through that was the right one. And the most frightening thing of all, the thing that took me years of therapy to even have words for, is that I began to agree with him. I began to believe I truly was the problem. The babies came, 4 of them, and they tied me tighter to that house and that man than any rope could have. Where would a woman with 4 children go? Back to parents who would say a wife's place is with her husband? To a bishop who would counsel me to be more submissive, to pray harder, to search my own heart for the sin that was surely causing my husband's coldness. I had no money of my own. I had never been allowed to drive. I had finished my schooling at 13. The world outside our community was a frightening blur. I had been taught my whole life to fear. Jacob did not need to lock a single door to keep me. The walls were already inside my own mind, and he had spent years building them there, one quiet punishment at a time. Rebecca and I never spoke of that night again, but she watched. Over the years, she would appear at my elbow at a quilting or a funeral, and she would simply stand close to me without a word. Once, when one of my children was sick, and I had not slept in 3 days, and Jacob had spent the evening telling me that a good mother would not have let the child fall ill in the first place, Rebecca came the next morning with a loaf of bread and a jar of soup. She set them on my table. She looked at me, at my swollen eyes, and she said only one thing. "I'm still here, Anna, whenever you're ready." Then she left. I told myself I did not know what she meant. I knew exactly what she meant. The morning everything broke was an ordinary one. My oldest daughter, Mary, was 13, the same age I had been when my own schooling ended. She had sewn a small thing for herself, a length of ribbon she had hidden. Nothing really, a child's harmless wish to feel pretty. Jacob found it, and I watched him turn on her with the exact cold voice, the exact still face, the exact patient cruelty that he had spent 11 years turning on me. I watched my daughter's shoulders fold inward. I watched her begin to apologize for something that was not a sin. I watched her start to believe that she was the problem. And in that moment, 11 years of fog lifted all at once. I heard Rebecca's voice as clearly as if she were standing behind the wash house again. He will make you believe it is your fault every time, until you cannot tell any more where he ends and your own mind begins. I had let him do it to me. I had told myself it was love or duty or my own failing. But I would not. I could not stand in my own kitchen and watch him begin to do it to my daughter. I went to Rebecca that afternoon. I did not smile and pat her hand this time. I sat at her table and I said the words I had not been able to say in 11 years. You were right. I should have listened to you. And my sister-in-law, who had carried this for over a decade, who had risked the wrath of her own family to whisper to a girl who would not hear her, took both my hands and she wept with me. She had a cousin who had left years before, English now, living near Columbus. There was a phone number she had kept hidden for me all this time, folded small, waiting for the day I would finally be ready. Leaving cost me everything the way it always does. The shunning came down fast and total. My parents' door closed. Letters returned unopened. The community I had known my whole life turned its back, because that is the price, and they make sure you pay all of it. But I took my children, and I took the one thing Rebecca had been trying to hand me in the dark 11 years before. The knowledge that the man I married was not the man I thought, and that staying silent was not the same as being good. In therapy in the English world, I finally learned the words for what had happened in that house: coercive control, emotional abuse, gaslighting, they called it, this slow convincing of a person that their own clear eyes are lying to them. I learned that a man does not need to raise his hand to break a woman. I learned that the absence of a bruise is not the absence of harm. And I learned, hardest of all, that I was not weak and I was not foolish. I was an 18-year-old girl who had been raised never to question, handed to a man I was given no chance to know, by a community that called my silence obedience and my obedience holiness. I grieve that girl behind the wash house, smiling and patting a frightened woman's hand. I wish I could go back and shake her and tell her that the person warning you is not always your enemy, that sometimes the only love in the room is the voice telling you the truth you do not want to hear. Rebecca knew what it would cost her to speak. She spoke anyway. That is not betrayal of a brother. That is the bravest kind of love I have ever known. If you were ever warned about someone and you smiled and looked away because listening was too frightening, I see you. If you spent years being told your own memory was wrong, your own feelings were pride, your own pain was your fault, I see you, and I am telling you what no one told me. The absence of a mark does not mean the absence of harm. You are not weak. You were taught not to see. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments what part stayed with you. And if you want more honest stories from behind the prayer cap, subscribe to Hannah, the Amish girl. There's still so much I haven't said. Until next time, the bravest voice in the room is often the one telling you what you don't want to hear. Listen to it. It might just save your life.